Alrighty, I think we should be good to go here. How's it going, everyone? Hope you're doing very, very well. Welcome to episode number 48 of Azren's Journal. If you are new to these videos, which probably nobody is, I think if you're watching these, you've probably seen them before, I'm assuming. But this is a segment on my YouTube channel where I talk about my personal language learning journey, and of course, give you guys a whole bunch of different language learning tips. I see some people that are hopping on the live stream. Hello, hello. I appreciate you guys catching this live. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, things that you want me to talk about, please feel free to throw them in the chat, in the live chat, and I will answer them. Now, I want to dive right into our topic today because it simultaneously gives you a personal language learning update in my life, and it's also going to give you a couple of thoughts to think about when it comes to language learning. So I went to my university today to take my Mandarin class. For those of you who don't know, I'm doing a second degree right now in East Asian language studies with a concentration in Mandarin, and something happened. I was walking, and as I'm walking, I had a thought. I realized that I think I had a test today. I'm walking and I'm like, I literally think we have a test today. And it's occurring to me as I'm literally walking to the class. Worst of all, I was actually worst of all, whatever. The worst thing about the whole thing was I was already late for class. I was already like 15 minutes late or 20 minutes late, really. And I was like, oh no, this is not good. I'm 20 minutes late for a 50-minute class. I think there's a test. Sure enough, I walk in and yes, there was a test. The thing about walking 20 minutes late to a test in this particular class is that you immediately, automatically lose about 20% of your grade, because the first part of every single Mandarin test we have with this particular teacher is a listening part. She reads us a couple of things and we have to answer some questions based on what she read. So because I was 20 minutes late, I obviously had already missed the reading section of the test. So I walked in, I literally automatically lost 20%, and I'm already 50% of the class is done. And so like, it's not a good scenario. I think, but at the end of the day, I will probably end up maybe, fingers crossed, passing that test. I'm not really sure, because I literally just forgot we had a test, didn't study, wasn't prepared, and just did my best. And I think if I had more time, I could have done better, but ultimately did not go very well. And that brings me to the topic of today's video, which is failing, right? Failing a language. I think this is an interesting topic, whether it's failing a specific test, whether it's failing in the sense of you tried to learn a language and you couldn't, whether it's, there's a lot of different ways that we could take this topic of failing. And I wanted to share some thoughts that I have. First of all, let's take it in an academic sense. I don't necessarily think that failing a test is that bad, not necessarily. I think we have to unpack why people think failing is bad. I think is an important thing to unpack. Some people think that failing a test is bad because it is a direct reflection of their intelligence. I think that is not true. I think your mark on a test does not reflect how smart or not smart you are. I think your mark on a test does nothing more than indicate if you were able to reverse engineer that test, and if you were able to respond to the questions in a way that the teacher wanted you to respond, right? Now, to an extent, maybe that will show a little bit of intelligence or a little bit of know-how, or it definitely shows something, but there's not a direct correlation between your mark on a test and how smart or not smart you are. I think that's important to understand, and I don't believe it's a good idea to have a lot of emotions tied up into how well or not well you do on a test. I think additionally there are people who are worried about failing, again in an academic sense, because of the consequences of failing. If for example, I'm probably not going to do very well on this test today. I'm probably going to pass, barely pass, or fail the test. And I think some people worry that, oh, if I fail this test and I fail the next test, and I do really poorly on a whole bunch of tests, I'm going to fail my degree. I'm going to fail high school. I'm not going to pass med school. I'm not going to be able to go into the profession that I wanted to go into, and on and on and on. A lot of thoughts like this, which are 100% valid. These are valid. These are completely valid thoughts. My perspective that I want to share is, and this is just for me. It's not. I don't think this is right or wrong. This is just for me personally, right? And I think for many people, my perspective is wrong. I think you have to take it in your own lens. I think that depending on what your degree is, the profession you want to go into, my perspective is not necessarily the right perspective, but this is how I choose to navigate my life. I, for myself, don't believe that the degree is going to be the be all and end all of if I'm able to get a job, right? That's not what I'm relying on. I'm not relying solely upon the degree. I'm relying upon my life experiences. I'm relying on my other work experiences. I'm relying on the travel experiences. I'm relying on my personality. I'm relying on my network. I'm relying on so many things outside of just that piece of paper. And while some people will look at my marks and they're not going to let me, I'm probably not going to get a job, and I'm probably not going to get that position with a specific company or working with a specific person. In fact, it's happened to me. I had a really cool job opportunity probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. It would have been really, really, I mean, I'm telling you, that job would have been a life-changing job. The opportunity that I had. Somebody contacted me. It was a crazy opportunity. I went for them. I interviewed. We discussed, and the moment the guy saw my grades, now I don't know if the grades was why he said no, but that was the most logical thing I could think of. The moment he saw what my transcript looked like at university, it didn't work out. He just didn't hire me. Like, this did not work out. In fact, he even ghosted me. He just didn't contact me again. And I thought, interesting. So I think that can happen, right? But at least for me, again, I'm stressing for me, I think that, with where I live in the world, the circumstances I have, with my DNA, the other skill sets I have, and blah, 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 I think the piece of paper has some value, no doubt, but it's not the be all and end all, right? So that also helps in an academic sense. I think in a non-academic sense, if we're looking at failing a language non-academically, failure in the sense of you tried to learn, but you were unable to learn, or you're not successful, or it was too difficult, or whatever happened, you quit, you stopped studying, you blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot to unpack here as well. I think we do have to look at this conversation of failing a language, a failure when you're learning another language. I think part one is you have to understand that having real expectations is important. Excuse me. I think there are people who set out to try and sound like a native speaker or close to a native speaker with the grammar knowledge, vocab knowledge, their accent, their pronunciation, their cadence, and all of that, which is fantastic. And then they view themselves as having failed because they haven't achieved that in 3 years' time, or 2 years' time, or 4 years' time, or however many years' time. I think we have to quantify it. I don't believe that I don't think that's a failure. You might be thinking it's a failure, but it's not, right? I think realistic expectations matter too. Like, how much time are you putting into the language? If you want to achieve, for example, a near native level of fluency, it's going to take a lot of effort. And maybe with your lifestyle, with your life circumstance, that's not going to be realistic for you. And you've almost set yourself up for failure, if that makes sense, right? Because you've chosen some kind of end outcome that is so wildly outside the realm of anything that your life circumstance allows you to achieve. I hate saying that kind of stuff because I think it can sound very Debbie Downer. I think people are bad at knowing what they're capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing. They're really bad at that. People as a whole, like human beings, are generally not good at knowing what we're able to accomplish and what we're not. Some people are delusional and they think they're going to be on the NBA and they're going to be the next LeBron James or the next famous tennis player, the next Roger Federer, the next, who knows, Cristiano Ronaldo, if you watch soccer, right? Like, Or they go the other way and people are like, oh my God, I'm so bad. And they're actually so good at something. They actually could be really, really good, but they underestimate. Like, we're not good at knowing how good we are at stuff as a human race, I find. It's just interesting. It's just an interesting thing, right? My personal view taken, actually, this is something I've been really doubling down into recently, and this is more not really language related, just life related, I suppose. My personal take in recent history has been, instead of trying to figure out how good you are, do something and figure out how good you are. Does that make sense? In fact, I shared this on a podcast recently. I want to talk about this more because I think I just want to reframe this correctly. There's a lot of people who view me as an entrepreneurial person. They're like, oh, he's an entrepreneur. Oh my God, that's so cool. Blah, blah, blah. That's so admirable. That's good for you. You're working for yourself. You work on your own schedule and this and that. That's so awesome. Wow. And there's a lot of people who view it that way. And I've only recently been able to articulate this clearly. It's literally just a test. I just want to see if I'm capable, if I have it in me to be self-employed for the long term, right? And I'm in the middle of a 10-year experiment. It's literally, this is Azren the language nerd. This whole thing is like a 10-year experiment, a 7-year experiment, a 6-year experience, an 8-year, I don't know how long, but it's a multi-year experiment to see if I put 100% of an effort into this, where do I end up? That's what I'm just trying to figure it out because I don't know. I have guesses. Part of my brain thinks I'm going to be like the greatest of all time. And it's like crazy obnoxious. Like, oh my God, I'm going to end up with really, really a very respectable kinds of results. Not greatest of all time, but like very respectable results. And I also recognize that there's a very good chance that I wake up 5 years, like in 3 more years, 2 more years, 6 more years, 4 more years. And I'm like, you know what? I haven't made enough progress. I don't think this is the right pathway, and I'll change. I literally had the thought of not that long ago. I was like, man, it's been 3 years just about. And there's a few elements of my work that have not progressed at the level that I would like to have, that would logically make sense to have progressed. Like there's certain things I've looked at and I'm like, that's not good. And I'm like, interesting. I'm in the middle of this, as I said, this is a 6 to 10 year experiment for me. So I'm about 50%, 30 to 50% of the way there. So it's okay. But it's an interesting data point. I was like, interesting. Maybe I won't be doing this forever. And yeah, so I think for languages, like with this whole failure and everything, I think maybe a good way to view it is taking failure as like off the table at first. Because literally, I think, how do I put this? I think here's a good way to put it. I think the best way to view it is you're going to put 100% effort in and you're trying an experiment. You're experimenting to see if you do your best. And if you adjust along the way, you try and get better, you are doing everything you can think of. If you're doing that along the way, it's an experiment to see where you end up so you can learn something about yourself. Does that make sense? That's kind of what I'm doing with this whole self-employment thing. I don't think I'm naturally like a business owner or someone who has that skill set. Not really. In fact, I only have it because by chance, really because I happened to have a work experience where I worked for myself and I was in a very salesy managerial position. Like that's kind of where I learned it all. As a child, I didn't want to do it. I didn't have those skill sets. I didn't have those tendencies. I wasn't selling stuff as a kid. I didn't like it. I was actually very socially awkward. Like, no, it wasn't me at all. And I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm just trying to learn to see if I can do it. That's all. So I encourage you guys to do that too. I encourage you. Life is pretty actually fun. A fun fact I was thinking about is how long life is. So funny. I think a lot of people default into thinking they'll have one career. Like they're going to go into a career and that's going to be their career. Maybe not one company, but I think people think I'm going to work in sales or I'm going to work in translation. I'm going to work in this. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to work as an engineer. I'm going to work in oil and gas. I'm going to work I'm in the trades. I'm going to work in a labor position. They have some picture and they almost feel that's what they're going to do for the bulk of their career. Maybe within different companies, maybe in different kinds of roles in that field, but they almost picture them staying in a field for their career. And I actually think, funnily enough, life is pretty long. Like unless you get hit by a bus or something, you're gonna be alive. You're gonna be alive a long time, and you definitely have the option to explore three. You really have the option to explore 2 to 3 careers. Think about it. Like I could work in my current field. I could be self-employed for like literally. I've worked in either self-employed or managerial positions where I have a ton of autonomy, like a ton, where it's really is in many ways like working for myself. I've worked in those kinds of fields now for 8.5 years. Okay. 8.5 years of working in business, management, sales, leadership, like that kinds of self-employment, right? I've done that for 8.5 years now. In 5 years, I will be 33 years old. That's going to be 13 years being that. I could decide in 5 years, that chapter of my career is done. Now I want to go into fashion. Who knows? I want to go into music. I want to go into something else. And I could have another 15-year chapter in music, and I can make a living in music, or I can make a living in construction or in now construction. I'm really bad at that, man. I don't know if I can do construction. Like that doesn't come very natural to me. Maybe I could, who knows, right? But maybe construction, right? And then I can be like, you know what? 15 years later, what would that be? So 33, I'm 48, and now I want to do something different. I can go 48 to 65. I can go do something different. And as long as you're saving money along the way, you're not having debt, you're mindful of your expenses, you're doing all that, you're good. You're totally fine. And you can have 3 careers and then be 67, retire or not retire, keep going if you want to, have a 4th career. Like there's a lot of stuff you could do, which I think is really interesting. It's funny to think about, right? And I think a lot of people don't view it that way. I've met people, let's stay away from that. Actually, it's not a topic I can talk about. Yeah, it's an interesting thing that we can have different multiple careers and like it's long. And I think if we realize how long life is, it kind of takes failure off the table, because you can have a micro failure, but you're going to be alive for another 60 years. So you have time to make up that mistake or that failure, that, like you have time. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about. So, wow, we got into very non-languagey topics, but very interesting topics. Maybe I'll rant on a couple more things for a minute or two, and then we can finish. I think, what else can I talk about? What else can we talk about here? I think we've not done enough language learning stuff. So let's go into some language learning topics. Let's go into, what can we talk about? Language learning. Anything in the chat? Let's check the chat here. Hello, Tessa. Overestimation of skills and overcritical judgment of self are 2 common issues. I agree. When experiments go wrong, it's great. Things you didn't even know enough to think of to prepare for or learn. Like, yeah, I don't know. Let's talk about this. Literally nothing else coming to mind. This is a very non-languagey episode today, wasn't it? Very, very non-languagey. I mean, not a lot of language stuff. So, well, we can finish it there. I appreciate your attention as per usual. You guys are the best. And we'll talk very, very soon. Bye for now. See you.